For years the world had enjoyed peace, real peace, not the uneasy silence that came after wars, but a genuine calm. Cities glowed at night, full of lights, music, laughter. Technology had erased hunger, ended many diseases, and connected people in ways the old generations could never imagine. Soldiers became engineers, tanks became museum pieces, and even the concept of a global war became something for movies and old history books. People believed the age of violence was behind them. Then the sky broke open. Without warning, massive objects pierced through the upper atmosphere. They were not meteors, not satellites gone wrong. These were ships the size of mountains, floating like shadows of death in the clouds. They hummed with energy, casting long shadows over entire cities, blocking the sun and turning day into a strange, eerie twilight. They came without an introduction, no declaration, no warning, just silence and then presence. Looked up in awe, some in terror, others froze, unsure of what was real and what was imagination. Phones began to buzz, cameras turned upwards. Millions of live streams captured the moment when the sky became alien. Earth's defenses scrambled into action as fast as they could. Jets lifted into the air. Tanks rolled into the streets, bunkers opened doors. But most soldiers had never trained for this. This wasn't war. This was something beyond war. The invaders called themselves the Tharkai, a message broadcasted across all screens and devices, in a language that was not human, and yet somehow all could understand. It was clear, direct, cold. We have arrived. Earth is under Tharkai control. Submit, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will be extinguished. It was the kind of message that should have triggered mass panic, the kind that should have sent nations begging for mercy and cities burning from chaos. But instead something strange happened. Humanity blinked. For a moment there was silence. No official response, no surrender, not even fear. What came instead was something no alien commander had expected. Laughter, not nervous laughter, not madness, but real, genuine laughter, from homes, cafes, streets, and soldiers alike. A meme went viral within minutes. A picture of one of the ships with the caption, "Oh no, anyway." Others followed. Someone edited the alien message and turned it into a remix. The world didn't scream, it didn't hide, it waited. The leaders of Earth didn't respond publicly, not yet. But behind the scenes, encrypted channels lit up in every nation. Old alliances were reawakened, secret protocols activated, defense networks linked into one silent web of global eyes. The laughter wasn't madness, it was the calm before the storm. A storm Earth had learned to hide deep within itself, a storm born from centuries of surviving its own darkness. Tharkai didn't understand that their own history was clean, controlled, logical. Their species had evolved in harmony with their planet, rarely facing internal war, never experiencing global destruction. They had studied Earth from a distance, judged it based on what they saw, a peaceful world easy to conquer. Their mistake wasn't in attacking Earth. It was in thinking peace meant weakness. They struck first, targeting major cities with precise energy blasts, expecting to decapitate leadership and send the world into chaos. But when they hit New York, they found it eerily empty. No screaming crowds, no emergency responders, only abandoned vehicles and silence. They hit Tokyo with the same results, then London, then Berlin. City after city looked like it had been left behind in a hurry. But there were no bodies, no signs of struggle. Just silence, and then came the whispering, a dark corner of the Tharkai mothership. The lead strategist reviewed the battlefield reports again and again. Something was off. The attacks had hit hard, but there was no counter, no defense, no retaliation, not even an official message from any world leader. But losses were being reported. Tharkai scout ships went dark, ground teams stopped sending data. Something was hunting them, and they didn't know what on earth. A small team of elite human operatives watched the alien feed from a deep underground command center, one of them a gray-haired veteran known only as Commander Meili smiled as he watched the Tharkai scramble for answers. He spoke to his team without turning his eyes from the screen. "They don't get it, do they?" His second-in-command shook her head. "They think we're scared." Hale nodded slowly. "We're not scared. We're waiting. We've been waiting for something like this our entire history." They just gave us a reason above them far in the sky. The Tharkai ships shifted, searching for a reaction. They didn't know it yet. But they had already made the worst mistake possible. They assumed humans would break, but humans don't break, they adapt. Deep beneath the cities they thought were empty, Earth was waking up not to scream, but to hunt. The Tharkai had conquered dozens of worlds before. They had brought mighty species to their knees, using fear strategy and overwhelming force. Each time the pattern was the same. Appear above the planet, show strength, deliver the message and wait for surrender. But Earth was different. The pattern was broken, and confusion had started to creep into their command deck's commander, Vektal of the Tharkai. Fleet stood in the heart of the mothership, surrounded by glowing screens filled with strange data feeds. Earth's internet was vast, chaotic, full of images, sounds, and languages that made no sense to the Tharkai mind. But what stood out most was the tone. Humans were not begging for mercy. They were mocking the invasion. In one video, a man stood in front of a Tharkai hologram holding a cup of coffee as he casually spoke into the camera. "Hello, aliens. If you're watching this, welcome to Earth. You might want to turn around before it gets weird." Vektal ordered the communication officers to establish direct contact with Earth's leaders. The humans were clearly disorganized, he thought. Perhaps they needed structure, guidance. Even if they refused to surrender, maybe they could be shown the proper place in the galactic order. After all, no species had ever resisted the Tharkai for long. The reply came 30 minutes later, but it wasn't what he expected. A woman's face appeared on the fleet-wide screens. She wore a worn military jacket with no flag behind her, just a blank steel wall. Her voice was calm, her expression almost amused. "You've made a mistake coming here." That was all she said before the signal cut off. Vektal slammed his clawed fist into the console below him. This wasn't how first contact was meant to go. They were supposed to kneel, not mock. They were supposed to beg, not smirk. He ordered a ground invasion. Drop squads were deployed across key regions, expecting light resistance. They were met with silence. Again, cities were empty, streets abandoned, homes cold and lifeless as if evacuated. In perfect order. But then the ambushes began in South America. A squad disappeared in the Amazon jungle without firing a single shot. In Russia, an armored unit was surrounded by old abandoned factories, only to vanish one by one with no trace. In Africa, a scout patrol entered a village and walked into a trap set with tools made from scraps and old tech. Their screens were recorded, but no bodies were recovered. The humans were not fighting like an army. They were fighting like predators. No formation, no front lines, no declarations. They watched, waited, and then struck with deadly precision back on the Tharkai flagship. The fleet AI systems began to flicker. Navigation glitches spread across their maps. False signals appeared all over the planet, showing human forces where there were none. It was chaos. Every move they made was predicted. Every attempt at control was met with sabotage. Their secure codes were cracked, fleet orders were reversed, and even their own surveillance drones began feeding wrong data. Someone had hacked into the Tharkai system, not just any hacker. This was something else, entirely alien to the Tharkai way of thinking, but horrifyingly effective. A junior officer on the command deck whispered the words. No one dared speak. "We are being hunted." Vektal heard it, but didn't respond. His mind was racing. They had come to conquer a world, but this was not conquest. This was survival, and he did not understand how it had changed so quickly. He sent a message to the Council of the Grand Stars requesting reinforcements. He asked for tactical experts to review what they called human combat behavior. But the request was met with silence. Even the comms linking back to their own empire had started to fail. Meanwhile, in an underground base beneath the Alps, a group of human leaders watched satellite feeds with calm expressions. They had prepared for this, not because they feared aliens, but because they never trusted peace to last forever. Earth was no stranger to war. Humanity had learned from its blood and fire. It had built peace not because it was weak, but because it knew exactly what it cost to fight. General Mason, an older man with sharp eyes and a quiet voice, stood in front of a live feed showing Tharkai ships shifting positions. He turned to his staff. They're confused. They think we're hiding. They don't understand we're waiting. One of his officers looked over, waiting for what Sir Mason smiled for the first time in days for them to get close enough back in orbit. Vectal gave one final order. All forces were to pull back, regroup, and reanalyze the threat. Earth was clearly not what they had expected. But just as his words were spoken, the lights on the bridge dimmed. A cold signal entered the main console. It was human in origin. A message played on every screen in the mothership, simple and terrifying. You re not the first to try, and you won't be the last to fail. Then all systems went dark. The Tharkai believed in order. Everything in their culture was structured, precise, controlled. Their weapons, their ships, even their thoughts followed patterns. That is why chaos disturbed them. That is why humans terrified them after the blackout. In the mothership, a full retreat was ordered. Ground troops were told to fall back to safer zones, regroup, and wait for reinforcements. But those reinforcements never came, because the moment they tried to descend into Earth's orbit, they were torn apart by something they could not see. At first they thought it was human aircrafts, but no radar picked them up. Then they believed it was sabotage from inside. But no traitors were found. Finally, they considered the possibility that Earth itself was the weapon, and in many ways they were right. The jungles became alive with traps. Old forests were covered in ancient mines forgotten by even the locals. Underground tunnels beneath cities became war zones, where human soldiers moved like shadows, hitting hard and vanishing without a trace. Abandoned subway systems turned into launch zones. Sewers carried soldiers between buildings like flowing rivers of death tar. Kai patrols stopped reporting back. Drones were captured mid-flight and hacked before being sent back to their motherships, carrying corrupted data that crashed entire systems. At night, the aliens heard sounds in the dark. Sounds they had no name for. Whispers, strange signals, sometimes even human laughter echoing through the corridors of their camps. In one city, a Tharkai squad set up a base in an old shopping mall. By morning, every single one of them had vanished. No blood, no damage, no sign of battle. The only thing left was a message written in spray paint on a crumbling wall. This is our home. In another zone, their scanners picked up heat signatures of civilians hiding in buildings. But when they moved in, they found mannequins, heat packs, and sound devices made to look like people. The real humans had been watching from rooftops, ready with sniper rifles and launchers. They struck without mercy, then disappeared into the smoke before any response could come. Commander Vectal grew more desperate. He sent elite trackers to find and capture human leaders. They were trained in over 50 different alien terrains, but they were not prepared for cities built like mazes, or for enemies who used their own fear as a weapon. One tracker reported being followed not by one human, but by something much worse. He claimed shadows moved on their own, that the walls whispered, and that the ground itself seemed to shift. He died 10 minutes after sending that message. His body was never recovered. In orbit above Earth, the Tharkai fleet was shrinking. Ships were being destroyed from within. Systems hacked, pilots misled into colliding with one another. A human virus had made it into their fleet code, and no one could stop it. It spread like wildfire, turning weapons offline, sending ships into re-entry or disabling shields at the worst possible moments. Back on Earth, in a hidden base beneath the old Rocky Mountains, a group of human specialists monitored every move. General Mason stood in front of a giant display screen showing Tharkai positions blinking out one by one. He did not smile, he did not cheer, he simply nodded. "They are learning what fear feels like," he said. To him stood a young woman named Suri, leader of the cyber division. Her fingers flew across a glowing keyboard as she launched another wave of eye traps into the alien fleet. "They thought we were animals," she said softly. "They thought wrong." In the shadows of the battlefield, one soldier moved alone. His name was Cole, a ghost unit trained for deep operations. His job was not to fight armies, but to send messages, not with words, but with action. He left symbols behind, signs carved into walls, bodies arranged in patterns that only humans understood. The Tharkai began calling him the Silent Death. No one had seen him and lived. No scanner detected him. No trap caught him. Wherever he went, destruction followed. Entire camps collapsed under coordinated strikes, and every time, the only clue was a single mark on the ground. The shape of a burning earth vectile called for a summit. Of his remaining commanders, he stood before them on a damaged deck of his crippled ship, his voice low. "We are not fighting a species," he said. "We are fighting a planet." Even as he spoke, one of his officers fell to the ground, his helmet sparking, his eyes wide with terror, not from pain but from realization. "They are everywhere," he whispered, and then the lights went out again. That same moment, deep in the human command bunker, Suri received a new signal. It was from inside the Tharkai mothership. A data stream had been opened without a trace. A backdoor had been left unguarded. She looked at Mason and gave a short nod. "We have control," she said. He turned back to the screen and whispered the words every soldier was waiting for. "Then it's time in." The darkness of the Tharkai mothership, deep inside the command core, something began to stir. The data streams had been infected not with viruses, not with chaos, but with memory. Human memory, images, videos, sounds, even emotions pulled from centuries of war, pain, and rage flowed into the Tharkai systems like a flood of nightmares. Commander Vectal stood in silence as the walls of his ship became screens showing flashes of Earth's darkest moments. He saw the mushroom clouds rise into the sky from ancient wars. He saw trenches filled with mud and blood, men screaming without limbs, tanks crushing cities, and bombs leveling nations. The cruelty was not alien, it was human, and it was endless. The Tharkai had never known such things. They had risen in unity, grown with purpose, and avoided self-destruction. Their leaders believed in evolution. Without violence, their people had no concept of mass suffering. Now they watched as history unfolded around them, unfiltered and raw. One of the officers dropped to his knees as the images played on loop, his mind unable to process the horror. Another tried to shut down the system, but it was too late. The human memory had become part of their ship. The lights dimmed, the air grew colder, and every screen whispered the same words again and again. "You started this, now see who we are." Down on Earth, in a hidden control room beneath the sands of Egypt, Suri stood over her console watching the data stream hold. She had done it. She had uploaded Project Revenant, a program not to destroy but to reveal. It was built from thousands of years of recorded human conflict and designed to force the enemy to face the true depth of what humanity had survived. General Mason walked beside her, eyes fixed on the live feed from orbit. "Do you think they understand now?" he asked. Suri did not answer right away. She knew what the Tharkai were seeing, and it chilled her even though she was born in an age of peace. "They understand now," she said. "But that doesn't mean they'll stop." Somewhere in the forests of Eastern Europe, Cole the Silent Deaf stood above the smoking remains of a Tharkai drop pod. He had not fired a single shot. He had set the trap 2 days ago using sound lures, old wires, and a bait signal pulled from a dead alien scout unit. The invaders never saw it coming. Cole did not hate the Tharkai. He did not know them. But he knew what they had done. He had seen civilians burned in their homes, soldiers disintegrated without warning, and families torn apart without reason. This was not war. This was arrogance. He moved silently through the trees toward his next target, unaware that someone was following him back. In orbit, Vectal regained his focus. He was a commander, and even in the face of nightmares he refused to fall. He shut off the memory stream with a forced override and called for his captains. They were shaken but alive, and they needed leadership. "We came here thinking they were animals," he said. "But they are something worse. They are survivors." He ordered the fleet to begin a new phase, not of conquest, but of capture. They needed human prisoners, live subjects, anything to understand how such a species could live with so much destruction inside them. The order never reached the ground. Across every Tharkai base, a signal triggered. A silent wave of code activated hidden devices planted during the first wave of human resistance. Explosions rocked command centers, weapons depots, and supply ships simultaneously. Their communication grid went offline, and navigation systems turned against them. This was not an accident. This was planned from the start. On the edge of the Pacific Ocean in a hidden sea base, a group of human commanders watched as the alien fleet broke apart piece by piece. General Mason leaned forward, his voice calm but heavy. They re-broken, but they don't know it yet. Suri adjusted her headset, receiving a new report from the International Network. Sir, she said, Cole has been spotted near the primary alien command center. He's going in alone. Mason nodded without hesitation. He won't be alone for long. Above the planet, as the Tharkai ships drifted, wounded, and lost, a strange signal began to pulse from Earth. It was not a message, not a threat. It was a heartbeat, strong, steady, growing louder with each passing moment. It came from every human base, every resistance cell, every underground facility. It was not meant for the aliens, it was meant for each other, a reminder that humanity was still here, still fighting, still dangerous. On the bridge of the Tharkai, Mothership Vectal stared into the hologram of Earth and whispered to himself, "What have we done?" The skies above Earth were no longer filled with glowing Tharkai ships, but with broken pieces of metal drifting like wounded beasts. Their once mighty fleet now flickered with failing lights and silent distress signals. The power they arrived with had been turned against them, piece by piece, move by move, and now they were stuck between retreat and defeat. Commander Vectal stood inside the ruined bridge of his mothership, sparks falling from above and smoke creeping through the vents. Around him, officers worked with shaking hands, trying to restore systems that refused to respond. Silence in the room was louder than any battle cry. It was the silence of fear. He knew now that Earth was more than just a planet. It was a trap, one designed with patience, fury, and memories that reached back far deeper than any Tharkai mind could understand. The humans were not just defending, they were punishing. Every step, every action was calculated to humiliate and confuse. Still, Tal refused to give in. He activated the Core Emergency Council, a group of elite minds connected through direct neural links. He gave a single command: capture one of them alive across the globe. The Tharkai adjusted their tactics. Their forces began focusing on isolating humans in rural zones where resistance was lighter. They used drone sound fields and stun beams to trap individuals and transport them into portable cells. In the deep forests of Canada, a hunter named Ewan was taken. While checking a radio tower in the deserts of Nevada, a mechanic named Jordan disappeared near an old power station. In the streets of Tokyo, a teenager named Ray was captured while delivering messages on foot. They were not soldiers, but they were human inside. The Tharkai labs, the prisoners were studied, scanned, questioned, and prodded. But what disturbed the aliens most was not what they found in their bodies. It was what they saw in their eyes. Even when cornered, even when bound, every human stared back with calm defiance. There was no begging, no fear, just silence. And in that silence, the Tharkai felt something new: doubt. On Earth, in a hidden facility under Iceland, General Mason reviewed the reports. He stood before a wall of digital maps, tracking alien troop shifts and capture zones around him. Officers buzzed with urgency, but he remained still. "They want to understand us," he said. "They think by capturing civilians they'll learn our secret." Suri, who had just arrived from the European front, shook her head. "They won't understand us by looking at bones and blood. They need to feel what we felt." She plugged in a data drive to the main console and activated Protocol Echo Flame, a program built for psychological disruption. It would feed false data into alien minds, images of betrayal, visions of destruction, dreams of burning worlds created from human memory, but shaped to affect non-human logic systems. "Want them to see what we see?" Mason asked. "No," Suri replied. "I want them to feel what we never forgot." Meanwhile, far from command centers in the ruins of an old city, Cole moved silently across broken rooftops. Below him was one of the new alien labs, heavily guarded and shielded. Most would call it suicide to go near it, but Cole was not most people. He had followed the energy trails, seen the prisoners taken, and now he was here not to observe, but to strike. Inside the lab, Jordan was strapped to a glowing table, staring at the ceiling without blinking, a Tharkai scientist Approached slowly, unsure of how to begin. "Why do you fight the alien?" asked Jordan. Looked him in the eye. "Why did you start?" The alien flinched outside. The power grid flickered and alarms rang as the system detected an intruder. Cole moved like a ghost through the shadows, disabling guards with silent tools and short-range pulses. When he reached the lab door, he used a signal from Suri's latest patch to override the lock. The door opened and chaos followed. Jordan broke free in the confusion, grabbing a weapon from a fallen alien and taking cover. Cole tossed him a cum device and nodded toward the hallway. "You good?" Jordan smirked. "Was waiting for you." As they escaped together, fire spread through the lab and all research was lost. One prisoner saved, one lab destroyed, and one message sent loud and clear: "We are not yours." To studying orbit, Vectal received the footage of the failed capture. The humans had taken back their own and destroyed priceless tech in the process. He closed the feed and looked around at the few officers who still believed this could end in victory. "This is no longer conquest," he said. "This is survival far above the Earth." The Tar Kai fleet floated like broken bones in the sky. Ships once proud and mighty now drifted helpless and damaged. Their weapons no longer roared, their shields flickered, their engines sputtered. What had begun as a proud invasion had turned into a slow, painful collapse. Commander Vectal stood alone in his chamber, looking at the glowing hologram of Earth beneath him. He did not speak, he did not blink. He simply watched as the world below slowly took back every inch of ground, every piece of sky, and every heartbeat that had been stolen. His people were losing not because they were weaker, but because they had underestimated what it meant to fight humans on Earth. The resistance was no longer hiding, it had become an army. Underground bunkers had become command centers, abandoned cities turned into supply hubs, forests and mountains filled with movement traps and weapon stores. Every language, every nation, every person had become part of one planned fight, until the last alien left their world inside the old tunnels beneath Berlin. Suri stood with a group of engineers and hackers. Her fingers danced across a control board, lighting up a massive map of the sky above. She smiled coldly and turned to General Mason, who was standing beside her, arms crossed and face unreadable. "Satellites are ready," she said. "Are you sure we can pull this off?" he asked. Suri nodded. "We're not shooting them down, we're dragging them out of the sky high." In orbit, dozens of ancient human satellites, long thought to be dead, came online again. But they were no longer for communication. They had been rebuilt quietly and loaded with magnetic disruptors and pulse weapons. Not enough to destroy, but just enough to disarm, to pull, to twist, to drag. And that is what they did. As the Tharkai ships floated above one by one, their engines shut down, their gravity controls snapped, their navigation failed, and they began to fall, not in flames, not in explosions, but slowly, painfully pulled into Earth's orbit like flies caught in a web. The humans did not want to destroy the ships. They wanted them to crash where everyone could. Seeing the mountains of Peru, people watched as a giant alien cruiser came down like a falling moon, grinding through stone and ice before finally resting in smoke and dust. In the deserts of Africa, another ship fell sideways, tearing through the sands like a claw through skin. Everywhere they crashed, people gathered, not in fear, but in silence, watching as their enemies were brought to Earth, not as rulers, but as wrecks. Cole stood near one of the crash sites in Siberia, waiting in the snow as the ship hissed and steamed. He held his rifle low but ready. From the wreckage, a Tharkai soldier crawled out, coughing and limping. When he looked up and saw Cole, he froze. Cole did not shoot. He walked over slowly, looked the alien in the eye and said only one thing: "Go home." Then he turned and disappeared back into the snow inside what remained of the Tharkai mothership. Panic had taken hold. Officers shouted, systems failed, lights blinked, and no one had answers. Commander Vik Tal tried to bring order, but it was too late. They were cut off from the fleet, from their labs, from their power. And then the final blow came. A signal broke through their defense barrier. A human voice filled every speaker. "This is Earth Defense Command. You invaded our home, you destroyed our cities. You thought we would break, but we are still here. This is not your world. This is not your victory. Surrender or be buried here." The voice cut out in silence. Returned. Vital stared at the screen, then turned to the last working officer. "What would you do if you were them?" he asked quietly. The officer paused. "I would make sure none of us ever returned back." On Earth, General Mason received the first message of surrender from a downed Tharkai squad. Not a trick, not a trap, a real surrender. They had laid down their weapons, raised their hands, and asked for peace. He did not smile. He simply looked at the stars and said, "We are not done yet." Deep underground, Suri watched the final wave of data crash into the alien network. It was not a virus this time, but a recording, a short one. A child speaking into a camera, eyes wide and voice soft. "You came to our home. We didn't ask for war, but we are not afraid of monsters. We were raised by them." Then the screen went black. All across Earth, the people stood and waited. There were no parades, no cheering, only the steady breath of a planet that had been pushed to the edge and chosen not to fall but to rise. The war was not over, but Earth had struck back, and now the sky belonged to them again. The sun rose slowly over a quiet Earth. Cities that once burned now stood in ashes and silence. The skies were no longer filled with fire or metal. The alien ships had fallen, some shattered, some surrendered, some simply vanished into the ocean depths. Humanity stood scarred but unbeaten. The war was no longer about guns or power. It was about the final decision. One last choice that would decide everything. In the ruins of New York, General Mason stood atop a crumbled tower, watching smoke rise in the distance. Behind him walked Suri, carrying a tablet filled with messages from across the globe. Her face was tired, her voice softer than before, but there was strength still in her eyes. "They want to negotiate," she said. Mason turned slowly. "Who?" "The last of the Tharkai fleet, their commander Vital." Suri nodded. "They are not asking for peace. They are asking for a place to survive at." That same moment, in a bunker under the destroyed alien mothership, Commander Vital stood surrounded by his wounded. He had lost more than ships, more than soldiers. He had lost purpose. His race had never known failure until now, and Earth had shown them what failure truly meant. He looked into the hologram of Earth and began to speak. This message went to every human channel, every military command, every city that still had power. "We came here proud and blind. We believed we were strong. We believed you were weak. We were wrong. You have survived horrors you created and horrors we brought. Yet you did not break. You adapted, you united. We do not ask for forgiveness. We ask only for a chance to leave or to live. You may choose." In the mountains of Nepal, a gathering of world leaders, resistance fighters, engineers and survivors sat in silence watching the transmission. A long silence followed. No one wanted to be the first to speak then. An old woman, a doctor who had saved hundreds during the first wave, stood and said something simple. "Mercy is not weakness. It is the final proof that we are better than them." In the forests of Siberia, Cole stood by a crashed ship and watched as a young alien soldier laid down his weapon. He did not move. He waited. The alien slowly sat and looked at the snow between them. "Why do you not finish me?" the alien asked. Cole answered without turning his head. "Because war ends when someone chooses not to kill." Back in Berlin, Suri activated the reply signal. She did not use military codes or fear tactics. Her message was simple, direct and human. "You may stay, but you will never command. You will never rule. You will rebuild what you destroyed. And if you try again, we will not stop. Next time Earth is not yours. It never was." Tal received the message and lowered his head. For the first time in his long life, he felt something strange. It was not defeat. It was something heavier, something sharper. It was respect. Years past, the Thatsia no longer wore armor. They no longer floated above cities or marched through streets. They lived among ruins, working beside humans, growing food, rebuilding structures, and learning what they had missed for so long. They learned about music and fire and laughter and pain. They learned that Earth was not just a death world. It was a world that refused to die. General Mason retired quietly. He moved to the mountains and never gave another order. Suri became part of the new Earth Unity Council, using her mind not for war but for peace. Cole vanished into the wind like he always did. Some say he trains others now in silence and shadow. The children of Earth grew up with memories of fire, but also of light. They were taught not just how to fight, but why they fought. They were told the stories not to hate, but to remember. In one of the old schools, a young boy raised his hand and asked the teacher a question. Why did we let the aliens live? The teacher smiled and said, because we are not them. Because we win with more than weapons. Because Earth does not destroy what surrenders. Outside that school, the sky was clear and bluebirds flew where ships once soared. Grass grew over the scars of war, and humanity walked forward without forgetting where it had been. Stars still waited, but now Earth would go to them, not as victims, not as prey, but as the species that made even monsters fear the dark. The end.